Sam Darnold's journey to the Super Bowl is also a story about patience, perception, and timing in the modern NFL. Just days before taking the field on the sport's biggest stage, Darnold quietly unlocked a $3 million bonus built into a contract that many around the league once labeled as one of the worst deals of the offseason. Now, with the Seattle Seahawks heading to the 2026 Super Bowl, that contract looks very different in hindsight. When the Seahawks traded Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders for a third-round pick, the move raised eyebrows across the league. Seattle then turned around and committed to Sam Darnold, a quarterback whose career had already included stops with the New York Jets, Carolina Panthers, San Francisco 49ers, and Minnesota Vikings. To many observers, Darnold felt like a bridge quarterback at best, a placeholder at worst. But internally, the Seahawks believed they were buying into untapped upside rather than settling for mediocrity. Darnold himself made it clear that the mutual belief mattered. He spoke openly about how important it was to feel wanted by an organization, to know that the team believed he could make an impact rather than simply fill a depth chart. For a quarterback who had spent years bouncing between systems and expectations, that buy-in became a turning point. Nearly a decade into his professional career, Darnold entered Seattle with experience, scars, and a much clearer understanding of who he was as a quarterback. That context matters when evaluating both his performance and his contract. From a financial perspective, Darnold has already carved out a highly successful NFL career. His net worth is estimated at $45 million, and his total career earnings are north of $105 million. Those numbers come from his time with 5 different franchises, reflecting both the league's continued interest in his talent and the premium placed on quarterbacks, even those viewed as inconsistent. The Seahawks contract was the most significant commitment of Darnold's career. He signed a 3-year, $100.5 million deal in free agency, averaging $33.5 million per year. That figure ranked him 18th among NFL quarterbacks at the time of signing, hardly elite money, but firmly in the territory of established starters. His guarantees, roughly $18.3 million per year, ranked 14th at the position, again signaling that Seattle viewed him as more than a stopgap. The structure of the deal told a more nuanced story. In 2025, Darnold carried a relatively modest base salary of $5.3 million. Add in a $200,000 workout bonus, $6.4 million in signing bonus proration, and $1.5 million in incentives, and his cap hit landed at $13.4 million. For a starting quarterback, that number was extremely manageable, giving the Seahawks flexibility as they reshaped the roster around him. The incentives, however, were where the contract became interesting. Built into the deal were performance benchmarks that aligned individual success with team success. Passing yards, completion percentage, offensive efficiency, and playoff achievements were all tied directly to Darnold's compensation. It was a bet by Seattle that if Darnold played well enough to earn those bonuses, the team would be winning anyway. That bet paid off. By winning the NFC Championship, Darnold officially triggered $3 million in bonuses. Those bonuses were tied to a combination of milestones, surpassing 4,000 passing yards, completing at least 67.5% of his passes, leading a top 10 offense, securing a playoff berth, winning a divisional-round game, and winning the conference championship. Each box checked represented not just personal achievement, but organizational success. Suddenly, the narrative around the contract shifted. What was once labeled reckless or misguided became a case study in incentive-driven roster building. When the deal was first announced, Pro Football Network included it among the worst of the offseason, not necessarily because of the raw numbers, but because of the broader context. On the open market, Darnold's average annual value and guarantees were considered reasonable for a mid-tier starter. He had finished 12th in quarterback grading metrics the previous season, meaning even modest regression would still produce acceptable value. The criticism focused on Seattle's direction as a franchise. The Seahawks had traded Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, moved on from several veterans, and sent mixed signals about whether they were rebuilding or contending. Paying a quarterback over $33 million per year in that environment felt contradictory to many analysts. What those critiques underestimated was how quickly circumstances can change in the NFL. Darnold delivered stability, efficiency, and leadership. He avoided the catastrophic mistakes that had defined earlier chapters of his career, protected the football, and allowed Seattle's defense and running game to control games. He did not need to be spectacular every week. He needed to be dependable, and he was. Looking ahead, the contract still gives Seattle options. If the Seahawks were to move on from Darnold in 2026, 5 days after the Super Bowl, they would incur $25.6 million in dead money. That is not insignificant, but it is not franchise crippling either, especially in an era of rising salary caps. In 2026, Darnold is scheduled to earn a $12.3 million base salary with $2.5 million already guaranteed for injury. He also carries a $15 million roster bonus that becomes fully guaranteed if he remains on Seattle's 90-man roster 5 days after the Super Bowl. That date effectively functions as a decision point for the franchise, forcing clarity on whether Darnold is viewed as a long-term answer or a short-term success story. If he remains with the Seahawks into 2027, his compensation jumps significantly. His base salary would rise to $25.3 million with an additional $10 million roster bonus due if he is still on the roster 5 days after the Super Bowl. By that point, Darnold would be firmly entrenched as the face of the franchise, and the financial commitment would reflect that status. To understand how far Darnold has come, it helps to revisit his previous contracts. In 2024, he signed a one-year, $10 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings, a classic prove-it contract. Of that, $8.75 million was guaranteed, including a $6.25 million signing bonus. It was a chance to reset his value, show growth, and re-enter the market with leverage. The year before, he had signed a one-year, $4.5 million contract with the San Francisco 49ers with $3.5 million guaranteed. That deal positioned him as a high-end backup in a quarterback-friendly system, another step in rebuilding his reputation. His NFL journey began in 2017 when the New York Jets selected him and signed him to a 4-year, $30.2 million rookie contract with a $20 million signing bonus. At the time, Darnold was viewed as a franchise savior. Instead, he entered a turbulent environment that shaped early perceptions of his career. What makes the current moment so striking is how sharply it contrasts with that early narrative. The quarterback once labeled a disappointment, a reclamation project, or a temporary solution is now leading a team to the Super Bowl and cashing incentive checks along the way. The $3 million bonus Darnold earned before the Super Bowl is symbolic. It represents validation, not just financially, but professionally. It confirms that the Seahawks' belief in him was not misplaced and that incentive-laden contracts, when paired with the right environment, can align motivation with performance. For Seattle, the contract no longer looks like one of the worst deals of the offseason. It looks like a calculated risk that paid off at the highest level. And for Sam Darnold, it marks the culmination of a long, winding road, one that now leads directly to football's biggest stage with both legacy and leverage firmly in his hands.